Hey guys, we're back. And when I say we, this time we have a new co host, Laura Weiner Kisser. If you remember, she was one of our guests months ago. Julie has to take a hiatus because she's just too busy with all of her stuff out in California. And she's going to be returning eventually, but Laura will be filling in the meantime, and I'm really excited about it. Laura, if you remember from previously, is a life coach, and this is going to be fun for us because we are going to combine themes in our work.
Mm.
So I told Laura my theme has been people feeling responsible for other people's lives. And Laura, do you want to talk about the theme that you've been seeing?
You bet. The theme that's been showing up for me this week has been around focusing on how you want to show up as a person rather than expecting or attaching to an idea of how you want others in your life to show up.
So we were kind of talking that those two topics kind of go hand in hand because if we're not taking responsibility for other people's lives, what are we doing? And hopefully, what we are doing is focusing on how we want to show up to things.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and dive in.
Let's,
I think, what'd you say?
I said, let's dive.
uh, I think with my week this week or the last couple weeks, it's just come up many times lately where people feel like they can't do something or shouldn't do something because it's going to upset someone else. But even bigger than that, there are people who have said things like, you're going to kill me with all this stress.
Mm,
And, or it's your fault. My chest is tightening.
mm,
And I've been telling my clients that is really an unfair thing to say to somebody. And it's really kind of manipulative and sick
mhm.
from my perspective. What do you think, Laura?
I agree. I'm not surprised by it, and it's definitely a theme that I've seen a lot in my work in general. And when I think about it, to me, it always goes to like attachment, right? Like, why do we feel responsible for other people's feelings? Because that was something we had to learn in order to feel safe. But I agree. I think it's a subconscious manipulation technique, honestly. And
Yeah.
for a lot of people, I think they don't know how to handle the discomfort of the emotions of people that they love.
Mm. What were you saying about the attachment piece, though? I'm really curious. I mean, I know that these are skills that we develop in order to feel safe, but what's the attachment piece there?
So, like, if you think about it, if when you're a kid and you're growing up, if you are in a household where you learn that certain behaviors give you kind of that dopamine rush of like, yay, I'm lovable. So, if you have a parent who is dysregulated, for instance, and you show up to soothe that parent, technically you're taking responsibility for their emotions and helping them process through it in some way or another, whether you're conscious of that or not. And it can kind of create a codependency to depend, like to a degree, and influence, what type of attachment you get. And it's not necessarily that you're going to be anxious or avoidant. Like it can ripple into different aspects of that based on some of the other aspects of how your home was growing up.
So, what is it, just out of my curiosity, what are some of the elements that create in a home environment the idea that you have to be responsible for somebody else's life?
Well, I think like our three basic emotional needs are love, safety, and belonging, right? Or psychological needs. And safety, there's physical safety, because if we're not alive, none of that matters, but there's also psychological safety. And then there's belonging. So as kids, when we don't have the tools to understand the different energies that are coming up in us and how that correlates to different emotions, we look to our parents. But even our parents can be limited in their emotional understanding and emotional regulation. And we ultimately, or what I believe is we ultimately like get their limits because we can't learn beyond their limits because they're teaching us what those boundaries are. So if you have a parent who, let's say, uh, a client of mine had this where anytime she was upset about something, her mom would always try and get her to think about what the other person was feeling. And
Oh, wow.
I understand it from a perspective of like trying to diversify her perspective, understand like what her feelings were, but also like how she could have impacted or influenced the other person. But it made like it was the essence of what made my client feel very responsible for everyone else's feelings because she kind of learned anytime she expressed herself, she was instructed to think of other people's feelings and kind of learn to adapt her behavior based on how she was or was not affecting other people's emotions. And so she always felt responsible. If someone's happy or sad, like that's a direct reflection of how she was being. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was thinking, uh, I think when there's an emotionally dysregulated person in the household, a person who is really attuned to emotion also um, sometimes picks up that responsibility. Like, because I understand your mood, I now am responsible for fixing it.
Yeah. I think there's, and that's what's so interesting about this is, our body is super adaptive. So it will find a way to feel safe. That's just another way that we learn to be responsible based on whatever, genes we get that are turned on or off based on the environment. So like there's a diversity of ways that could create this as the foundation. And honestly, if we look at culture, it's supported there. Like there are acceptable places to emote,
Your
emote,
car, your bedroom.
a funeral, etc. Right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
yes, your car and your bedroom, great places. Personal favorite is shower. I don't know why. Maybe
Oh, yeah. Somebody said that to me this week that she likes a good shower cry.
it's the best. I don't know if it's because the water mixes with the tears or it's all refreshing, but yeah, definitely more of a shower crier myself. Um, but if we take it to a public domain, like even those examples, they were all private. Like it's not okay to feel sad in public
Hmm.
unless you're at a funeral, for instance. So where do we learn that? And why is that way? Because sadness is naturally going to come up throughout your day. It's an organic emotion that is meant to motivate us just like everything else. But because it's not socially acceptable, we suppress it or repress it or deflect or distract. And then we're ultimately the ones who have to pay the price, be that dealing with it or, you know, eventually potentially getting sick or getting depressed.
Yeah. It is interesting how there's many paths to the same behavior. Um, and there's like something that I want to be clear about is I feel like there's everything exists on a spectrum.
For sure.
And anytime we're in the extremes, it's not good. So we don't want to feel absolutely no responsibility to anyone in any way. And then we also don't want to feel responsible to everyone for everything. And unfortunately, from my perspective, and I'd love to hear what you think about it, it seems to me like humans tend to move from one extreme to another. Like we just have a really hard time finding the balance in life. And I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges in life is like trying to find that sweet spot.
Oh, for sure. We love to overcompensate. Surfing the waves is a lot less exciting and passionate than riding the spikes, is kind of how I like to think of it. But I think language matters here. Like, I don't think I'm ever responsible for someone else's emotions, but I do believe that I can influence their emotions. But at the end of the day, how I represent myself, how I communicate something, if I do that to 100 people, I'm gonna get a variety of emotional responses. So to that degree, like, yes, I'm influencing it, but they're always running it through their filter, their limiting beliefs, their life experience, and interpreting it in whatever way makes them feel like themselves or like confirms their identity because our brain's always looking for that psychological safety. But I'll tell you one thing I really think this is sourced through is not understanding belonging.
Okay. Go on.
So Brene Brown talks about this concept of near enemies. And she talks how like we understand far enemies, like the opposite of love is hate or indifference, depending on who you ask. So we understand like the deep contrast, but we don't understand things that are really close to each other. So for instance, the near enemy of belonging is fitting in. Because if you're adapting your behavior to be accepted by specific people, you can't be in belonging, you're changing who you are to fit in. So it's near and it's close to belonging because you're being parts of your authentic self, but you're not truly being all of who you are. And true deep belonging is allowing your authentic self to be free and trusting that you're not going to be ostracized for that because that's we're tribal creatures. We need that sense of belonging. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Um, I think what I was thinking about when I said the word responsible is a whole other arena where I'm like thinking about community and how I do think that we have an obligation or a responsibility to help one another, but that goes along with what you're saying about influencing
Mhm.
other people. It's not our responsibility to make sure people feel a certain way, but I do believe it's our responsibility to help when if we can, if it's not, you know what I mean, like it's not going to violate your boundaries in any way, but to be there for other people, I do think that is one of our responsibilities. So that's what I meant when I was saying responsibility, but tying in what you're talking about with belonging, I mean, I think that that's part of the community mindset and feeling like you're a part of a community. And it kind of goes back to that whole idea of us feeling like rejection, feeling like death, because we do need that tribe. We need that to survive.
Mm. Yeah, so I think it's interesting because I feel like we're in two different tangents. So I do see it all like interconnecting, right? So I'm gonna close the belonging loop in my brain of
Okay.
when we like when we belong to ourselves first, which is technically what we're supposed to do, like we can't ask other people to belong with us or feel like we belong with them if we don't know ourselves fully or accept ourselves fully, even for the stuff we don't like. So true belonging really starts within. And I think it matters when we're talking about being responsible for other people's feelings because a big reason why we feel responsible for other people's feelings is the threat of if we don't, what happens. But if you have that inner sense of belonging, you can hold space for both, in my opinion. Like you can make decisions that align with your boundaries that could potentially hurt someone's feelings, but understand that sometimes that's not always bad. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people grow stronger, like a lot of relationships strengthen through conflict and through turmoil by communicating and repairing. So like there's
Yeah.
a really strong value to that. But if community or friendship is built on transactional things, like I'm abiding by the code and making sure I don't trigger your emotions, you're not being authentic to yourself either. And that's where it goes to kind of in that community essence of like, who do you want to be and how do you want to show up? Because,
Wait a minute. So now I need to go backwards a sec
okay,
because you said you need to be able to be your authentic self and not be worried about triggering people. But from my perspective, if you know that something triggers someone, you would be a little bit more cautious. Now, obviously, again, with the spectrum, we don't want to be walking on eggshells all the time. But if there's something you can do easily to, like reasonable accommodations, essentially, like you don't like the N word, I'm not going to use it. Now, that's obviously an extreme
right.
example, but I'm just saying, like, you know what I'm saying?
I absolutely do. And I don't think
Okay.
you're wrong. And I think it's on a, like, this whole conversation is on a spectrum, right?
Right.
Like, if there's something simple, like not saying the N word, duh, that's a very obvious, right? Like, box
Yeah.
checked, easy peasy. If you like don't want me to talk about something you're insecure about, even if I think it's funny, okay, that's easy. I don't need to talk about that. So there are definitely those where you can, but again, you can choose how you want to show up in those moments. I think where a lot of people struggle with at least this was a lot of my experiences where I struggled with feeling responsible for other people's emotions in a way that was challenging or kind of had conflict was when it was in direct conflict with something I needed or something I felt. So it was either I was going to take that pain or I was going to meet their emotion. Like I was going to choose what they need and be what they need me to be, or I was going to be what I needed myself to be, but could potentially hurt them. And I think that's where most of the time I don't think people have a hard time being responsible for other people's feelings or influencing it. It's when there's a conflict within themselves in that same dynamic where it becomes really hard. And I think that's where belonging really ties in because I do agree that human nature, at least I like to believe that human nature hopes to support and wants to build community and isn't trying to piss everybody off. Now, that's not everyone in this world, but I'd like to think a majority of us want to be supportive of other people. But I think they're like we said, spectrum, there are totally different lines and everyone has their own experience. And that's where it gets really hard.
Yeah. So, um, kind of like summarizing some of what we've talked about so far, um, belonging comes first, and that's belonging with yourself first,
Mhm.
and then being the most authentic version of yourself and staying in alignment with that, even when it might hurt somebody else because you're prioritizing yourself.
Yeah. Uh, well said, per usual. Um, I think Glennon Doyle actually, she put it in a really good perspective. She had a podcast about guilt, and she said, there's a feeling that's similar to guilt, but it's not the same thing as guilt. It's a different discomfort. It arises when you've taken action in alignment with your values, but that action also conflicts with the code of belonging in whatever your community or specific familial regimen was. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, which is typically what we experience when we feel guilt. It means you're taking action in alignment with your values, and that's a new experience for you. So it's uncomfortable and it's not predictable to your brain yet. And the
Yeah.
fact that it breaks the quote unquote like emotional code, you're feeling those fear and anxiety emotions as well. But it typically means you're growing, not that you're doing something wrong.
And I'll say that I always tell my clients, you're going to understand the logic before you feel the emotion because at least that's how it worked for me. Like I understand I'm not doing anything wrong, but I still feel bad
Yeah.
and wrong. Um, I think diminishes over time and hopefully it gets shorter and less intense over time. But initially, when you start prioritizing yourself, that feeling is going to be there.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's actually a sign of growth. Like if you think about it from like, okay, I might get a little nerdy for a second, but if you think about it from
Love
like
it.
the science lens of like what's going on in our stress response and how our brain creates safety, like it has that psychological loop based on known patterns. That's what creates our hormone habits and that's what creates homeostasis, right?
Yeah.
So we try something new. Our brain can't predict if we are going to survive that or not. So it does exactly what it's supposed to do. It makes you present. How does it make you present? It makes you feel uncomfortable because when we're uncomfortable, we tend to be quite aware of it. So it kind of pops you into your conscious being to be intentional about how you proceed through this new unknown way of being. So it's definitely uncomfortable. And to that point, like not fun or quote unquote desirable. But I
Oh
do
yeah.
think it's purposeful and part of the growing path.
Yeah. Well, you can't grow without discomfort. It's literally growing pains, right?
Yeah. They don't call it that for nothing. And when you, but the thing is that I like is if you practice it enough, if you get enough reps in, the brain starts to be able to predict it and you don't get the same weighted response.
Yeah.
So to that point, I think having like a really strong community, or at least trying to find that where you can belong, where you have your people you can go to that won't judge you, but will support you as you try to become this person. I think it's really, really important. I know it was for me at least.
Well, that's one of the reasons I love you because you just accept the hot mess of a person
Girlfriend
as
freaking
it
same. You
is.
and that's it's kind of funny that you mention it because I think one of the things a lot of women fall into is I have to present myself in a specific way or I'm going to be judged for it. And I know you and I have talked about this previously. I don't really believe in judgment. It doesn't make sense to me. But when I see someone who's late, it doesn't make me feel as guilty for being late. And I'm not saying you've been late. I've definitely been late, but that happens.
I've been late.
I'm,
Don't be polite on air.
I'm sure you have, but I honestly don't remember it because I'm not keeping track of it. Because when you've had your messy moments, it made me feel safe to be messy.
Mm.
It's one of the things I love about you is how carefree and just like open you are to being you.
I don't know how to be anything else. So I guess I'm lucky in that way. Like maybe I just don't have the energy anymore because I do remember feeling the pressures when I was younger, but I think I must have hit a capacity at some point. And I was like, well, you
I
just get
mean,
what you get now, people.
I'm a fan personally, so keep doing you, don't go backwards, don't find any more capacity. Let's be messy together. But like life is messy. And it's funny. I was talking this weekend with some of my cousins about how I feel like a lot of people misunderstand what love really is.
Mm-hmm.
Love isn't supposed to be conditional, right? Like it's not supposed to be if you show up on time with the right food, looking how I want you to look, then I'll love you.
Mm.
That's not belonging. That's transactional. Like there are prerequisites to me being okay with you. And if you have to cancel plans with me because you've had a long day or because your mental health is in the crapper or whatever reason, like I'll miss you, but I don't make it mean something about me, which is where a lot of people get themselves in trouble. And to that degree, being able to belong to yourself and be like you, all messiness, all ugliness, saying the things you're not supposed to say out loud, but knowing that person is gonna have your back, not hold it against you. And like that to me, that's belonging and that's love. Because it's knowing the character and the morals of the person, not letting the moment bamboozle you about who they really are.
Hmm. I think that's so beautiful. I have a tough time believing in unconditional love in relationships outside of like parent child. And even in parent child, I feel like sometimes that love can be a little bit conditional.
Dude,
I'm not saying I'm not saying for myself, although I don't know. My children haven't pushed me enough yet, so we shall see. We shall see how that
to be
goes.
continued.
Yes, I'll keep you all posted. Um, but I very much appreciate what you're saying, and I agree that I think the overarching message to me and what you just said is that we judge ourselves on moments, and we hold ourselves. We're so critical of ourselves on small things. Like there's so many people I work with that will analyze the words that they used and be like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said it like that. I shouldn't have used that word. I shouldn't have made this hand gesture." Like the
Yeah.
smallest things people worry about. And like, I don't know, maybe it's me, but I don't think it's the big picture that matters here, not like the specific word that you used. You can always say, maybe that wasn't the best word.
Right. But I think like to that point, that's where fear comes in, right? Like
Yeah.
fear of not being heard, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being seen, and fear of like repair. Because a lot of people see repair as conflict, and because it is for a lot of people. But, I always use the analogy when you break a bone, it grows back stronger. And
Mm.
if you, that's actually true, by the way. And when you repair, there's typically one of two things that's going to happen, but you're going to understand where the relationship lies. Like if we ever get in a fight, which God willing we won't, but if we do, I trust both of us to repair. Um, you want to continue the relationship and I want to continue the relationship, the repair will make us closer. But if one of us wouldn't want to continue the relationship, the repair would naturally take us in our own separate ways with time, which hurts, sure. And like that's why people avoid it sometimes and are afraid of it. But you're just taking a different type of poison by pretending to be someone else to appease and get the love or perception of love from that person to begin with. You know what I mean?
Okay, so that then kind of ties into what we were talking about is yeah, right? You did that on purpose, didn't you?
I did. You caught it.
Damn, you're good.
I'm
So
sneaky. You
beautiful.
got it.
Okay. So so let's dive into that aspect of things. So if we're letting go of responsibility for other people's feelings and letting go of the obligatory uh for me it's a feeling that I get like oh it's an obligation like so many things feel like obligations to me.
Mhm.
um so if we're letting go of that framework and we're saying okay I'm going to live my authentic life, I'm going to accept myself, but then how do I
How do I want to show up?
interact? Yeah.
Yeah. I think you can be very loving and kind and respectful and have your own back, even if that means hurting someone else. And I mean, I've had to deliver hard messages and I've been sobbing while I've done it. But like, there's no part of me that wants to do this. There's no part of me that wants to hurt you. I see what I'm doing and I have to do this for myself. Like, I can't keep taking this pain because it's having a negative effect on my health at this point. And I've been trying to take it because I don't want to put you guys in pain, but I can't do that anymore. And I can't be responsible for your pain. So I'm sorry. I really, really am. And I hope you understand, like, I don't want to do this, but I have to for my own well-being and my own health. And I hope you can understand that. And like
What kind of reactions do you get with that?
a lot softer, a lot
I
more
can
people tend to
imagine.
be like kinder and they're like, they'll still express their pain, like, but they also will say, we don't want you to suffer. So it kind of puts us on
Mhm.
like the same playing field of like, I recognize what I'm doing to you, quote unquote, what I'm doing. I don't believe I'm doing it to them, but that doesn't mean that's not how they identify it. And
Yeah.
I'm not like stuck on my own pride where I can't apologize when I don't regret something or I can't acknowledge or take accountability for causing feelings, even if I don't think I am, because I recognize people's limitations. And to me, it's all about connection. So connecting where they are is more important and more purposeful to me than protecting my ego, if you want to call it that. Does that make sense?
I think that's so beautiful.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think you can address things and like, yeah, it makes sense that you're in pain, or I understand why you would be angry by this. And I'm sorry that my actions are causing that. I really am. And like that can be as simple as it is. Like you can show up and validate another person's emotions. You can show up, recognize how you are influencing their emotions and still not feel like it's your responsibility, but recognize you can still love them and show them love and show them you care without having to sabotage yourself.
Yeah, so I guess in the examples you're giving, that's like really like deep kind of situation. Um, what about just like your average social interactions?
Give me an example. I'm a deep person, you know this. Give me an example.
I know. I mean, I guess one that I use with my clients all the time is, just as far as like figuring out what your boundaries should be in the first place, right? Like this is a
Mm.
dumb one. But what I'll say to them is if your friend calls you and your friend's like, "Hey, I'm really sick. Can you bring me some chicken soup?" I mean, now we have Uber Eats, so let's just pretend we don't. Um, if you can pick them up chicken soup and drop it off and it's not going to disrupt your entire day, then yeah, of course, do it. But if it's all the way on the other side of town to get the chicken soup and traffic's going to be really bad and it's going to really stress you out and put you behind, then you that's not something you can do. So
Yeah.
for the smaller things, I'm going to guess you're not calling your friend crying saying, "I can't pick you up chicken soup."
You never know. It depends on the
You
day.
never know.
Am I in the shower? I like crying in the shower. So, it's
Am I
50.
on my period? I don't know.
There's a lot of components here. But okay, using that example, um, I think my answer is going to be probably different than how most people experience it, or even how you might advise. I believed in living very wholeheartedly. So, like, to me, I'd be like, I really, really want to, and it's really hard for me to tell you that I can't. I want to help you. I want to take care of you, and I don't have that capacity right now. And I love you, and I hope you can be okay with that.
I
And
think that, okay, you know what I think about that?
what do you
Let
think
me
about
tell
it,
you.
girl?
Let me tell you what I think about
All
that.
right, I'm ready. Hit me.
I think that you know yourself so well and you understand what's going on so well that that's where your answers come from. For a person who hasn't done as much deep work as you have, I feel like they wouldn't even know to say it like
Probably. And quite
that.
frankly, not to sound like a dick, but I'd hope not, because I did a lot of freaking work to get through my stuff to get to this space of understanding myself. And like maybe
Yeah.
that's motivating in general, but it is very freeing to like understand yourself. And ultimately, I had to get to belonging and understanding like I was showing up for everyone else, and abandoning myself and neglecting myself at any moment I had the opportunity. It was horrible. And I didn't know any other way of living. And
Yeah.
pain wakes you up. And I mean,
Mm.
I really think I got lucky. Like, I don't know what it was, if it was intuition or what, but like something spoke to me, told me about coaching. I became a coach, and like little did I know it would be like, hey, this is who you are now. And it's like just firework after bomb after like there wasn't a shower I didn't cry in, quite frankly, for like at least a year. But
Oh,
now I
so
get
much catharsis.
very much so. And now I get to like live, like actively live for me with intention, creating strong connections and bonds. And it's just more fulfilling to me. But to answer your original question of like for someone who doesn't know themselves as well, I'm assuming you're asking how do they say no, right? Like how do they say no, I can't deliver the chicken soup.
Yeah.
I don't remember as much about what it was like back then because I was very dissociated, but this is what's coming up for me. I
Okay.
probably say something similar, like I really want to, but I don't think I can.
Oh, that's very simple. Yeah.
Is that deep?
No, that was very simple. Very simple. But very true. Um, and I think that matters. Uh, God, I feel like I reference the conference that we went to all the time now.
This was great.
Um, yeah, but one of the things that they said at the conference was there's a difference between saying, "Thanks, I had a great time," and saying, "Thank you so much. I really felt like I belonged when I came to the party. Everybody was so kind and welcoming, and I had so much fun. And I haven't laughed like that in so long." And you know what I mean? Like those kind of feel very different. And it's the same thing with what you just described, like your deliveries that you gave.
100%. Like
Yeah.
Uh, there's a quote I read when I was 25 that was, if you had 60 seconds left to live, who would you call, what would you say, and why are you waiting? And it's been a quote
Oh,
that like all it really woke me up to like honestly, I know you know this because I regularly express how much I love you, but um I didn't used to do that. When I read that quote,
mhm.
it made me want to because and also I heard people at their deathbeds or at funerals saying like, I wish I would have told so and so something. And like
Yeah.
you can never tell someone how awesome they are enough. You can never tell someone you love how much you love them enough. And quite frankly, the more we actually say that, it makes it easier for them to accept our no's, in my opinion.
Ah, that's a really good point. Oh, shit. I think I just had an aha moment.
Boom.
That's a really good point. Yeah,
That
because the
goes to
same
like
thing with,
you showing up as a person you want to be. Like, I want the people in my life to know undoubtedly how I feel about them. Do you know I love you?
yeah.
All right, good. I'm doing a good job with you. I don't know about the rest of them, but I'm trying. But like, that should never be a question mark. And like, if you ever have a scenario where like you serve me pizza at breakfast and fruit snacks,
Oh
I,
no, it's a real example, guys. I've done it.
first off, I love pizza all the time, desert island food till I die. And who doesn't like fruit snacks? But like, to me, you receive my love if you understand I don't care that that's what you serve me for breakfast because I'm showing up to be with you, right?
Oh my God, I adore you so much. That's so true. It
But
is true.
yeah, it's showing that's like learn to your point, like I have done a lot of work to understand who I am. So I it does make it easier for me to show up as who I want to be because I understand who I want to be right now comes from me, not from whatever code I was taught about what it means to belong in certain dynamics.
Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. Um, this was beautiful, and I love everything that we talked about. But now I'm curious about other people's limitations. Do you think
Mm.
we can talk about that next time?
Oh yeah, girl, I got
Okay.
limited. Yep, yep. Sign
Okay.
me up.
Because you used it in a couple things that you were saying, and I think I know what you're talking about, but I would really like everybody else to talk to think about it because I think it's one of those things that shifts your perspective. And there's so many moments in my life where if I could just shift my perspective a little bit, it made a huge difference.
Mhm.
So, um, so I would love to dive into that next time if you are
Yeah.
cool with it.
Stay tuned. Limitations rolling up. How do we work with people's limitations? What are they? How do we recognize them? Sign me up. I'll be here.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Likewise, toodles.